Welcome to the channel, everyone. I'm going to be showing you how to remove and replace the power steering pump on this car. This specifically is an 06 Audi A4 2.0 turbo, quattro, black leather interior, 17-inch wheels, automatic, in case that matters to anyone at all. If you look right in here, you can see we've got a power steering problem, and it's everywhere, and this is why. All right, everybody, let's gather some tools. You are going to need a 17mm open end wrench, flathead screwdriver, 3/8-inch ratchet, a pair of cutters, a 6mm Allen, 7mm wrench, 22mm socket, 13mm socket, 10mm socket, 6mm Allen socket, and a drain bowl. Also, I forgot to mention a hose clamp, 19 to 29mm preferably. I deal with oil and stuff a lot, so I'll be putting on a pair of gloves. Maybe I need a better brand. Can anyone recommend some good disposable gloves? Alright, first step, when you're unplugging anything, you need to unhook the battery. I don't really know why, maybe so you don't confuse the car or something. Remove the intake tube that's above the pump. It's just held on with hose clamp. You can use a flathead screwdriver for the top one, assuming that it's a factory clamp. The bottom one, I had to use a 7mm wrench as I couldn't access it with a screwdriver. My tube was on there pretty good, and I had to use a flathead to pry on the lip to loosen up that connection. The accessory belt needs to come off next. Take the 17mm wrench to turn the belt tensioner and loosen and remove the belt for the alternator pulley. You can either let it hang or take it out completely. These older cars have very brittle connectors. When I'm unplugging this alternator, I carefully pry the plug off after squeezing the retainer clip. Now it's not going to fully come out because the dipstick is in the way. Remove the protective cover on the power wire nut on the alternator. This nut is a 13mm. If you do not have the battery disconnected, you will need to cover this wire. There are only 4 6mm Allen key bolts holding this alternator on. This will mind the hose has to be loosened with the long side. Tool hack of the day, use a closed end wrench on the short side of the Allen key to gain leverage. And the bottom two are very easy to access. Once it's unbolted, you can pull the alternator right out. Alright, look at all that room we just created just by moving a couple other bolts, a clip, a nut, and the belt already had to come off for the power steering pump anyway. So, also we can get a way better look at what we do need to remove, and from here it looks like we've got, focus, 3 bolts to remove. We got one there, and then on the back side we've got one there, and if I find any more I will definitely include that as well. But that's all it looks like. Also, check out all the sludge on this alternator. It is so gooey. Honestly, I don't know if that's healthy or not. I don't know if it matters if the alternator gets icky or gooey. I'd like to know. If somebody knows, let me know. Now take that drain ball, place it under the pump. It's way easier to remove all the hoses while the pump is still bolted up. Snip the non-reusable clamp off the rubber hose. These hoses can be pretty glued on there, so give it a twist to loosen it first and then pull it off. The hardline banjo bolt is a 22mm. Once you get the bolt out, keep track of those sealing washers on both sides of the fitting. They may be stuck like this one is, just push it loose with the flathead. And do not lose them. Removing the pump is probably the hardest part of this whole job. All the bolts are 6mm Allen keys. You need a 6mm Allen socket to access the front ones, as a regular Allen key will not reach. I found it out best that you can do the engine bay lay to access all of these. The easiest way I found to insert this tool is from the front upper driver's side pocket. These are the pockets that I'm talking about. This one right here is the one you want to use on the back of the fan to recess the ratchet in. Then spin the pulley around so you can slip the socket through one of the holes in the pulley. Just take it out the same way. And once you crack these bolts loose, remove the ratchet and spin the rest by hand. There's just not enough room for you to back it out all the way with the ratchet. The top one is easy to spin out with your fingers. The one on the engine side is hard to access, but I found a method that works. Put your finger through one of the pulley holes and take your thumb around the pulley and spin the bolt out that way. Okay, so I'm trying to wiggle this thing out and I found another bolt that's on the bottom of the pump. So in reference to that one, this is the top of the power steering pump. It is going to sit right directly at the bottom through that hole. This one I couldn't access with my fingers after breaking it loose, but I figured out I could use the socket to back it out with my fingers. It's just a little hard to see what you're doing down there. And finally, you can pry this pump out. It's a little pinched by design, so I had to use a screwdriver to help pop it out. Now obviously, if this is your daily driver, you probably would like to get a brand new one, and I'm on a budget and I have no problem buying a used one. So if you're like me, trying to save a dime or two, if you want to trust getting yourself a used one, so be it. Also, there's cheaper alternatives to a brand new one. You could get a remanufactured one, but they will charge you extra for a core, and you'll have to send in your old one. I will be taking that apart later in the video, see if it actually was a seal. But for now, let's get this used one inside, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Also, before I put this in, I do want to make sure that this is the exact same part, okay? Before we continue forward, you want to make sure the shape of the top, how many bolts are in there, just the direction of all the pipes. Even the pulleys, I measured those up too. The pulleys are the exact same size. So we are good to go to throw this thing in. The install process is pretty much the reverse of removal, but I still would like to share with you guys and tell a few tips along the way. Now you're probably going to have to tap the new pump into place. When doing that, I want to line up the most easiest bolt hole to access for the first bolt. The second bolt is the one in the rear, which is the next easiest. You'll probably have to give it a little wiggle to line things up. I'd also like to mention that clean threads will help you thread these in by hand. And don't forget the engine bay lay. The one closest to the engine was easiest to use the socket in my hand to thread in. And you're probably going to drop it a lot. I did find the best method for installing the bottom bolt as well. All you got to do is take the bolt in your fingers like this, then insert it from behind the pulley through one of the holes. Take your other hand and push on the end of the bolt to stabilize it and push it into the hole. You're going to feel it drop. Then thread all the bolts in so you can fit the ratchet with the socket to snug them down. Remember that clamp that I snipped? It's time to replace that with a hose clamp. I'm using a 19 to 29 millimeter size. Pop that on the hose, then pop the hose on the pump. Whoopsie! It'll be smart to tighten this clamp down at an angle that's easily accessible in case you have to come back to it later. I hope you didn't lose those crush washers, because it's time to use those. Put one directly on the banjo bolt, and the other one goes underneath the hose fitting. Thread the bolt in by hand, and snug it up pretty tight to seal those crush washers. Now the alternator can go back in. On this particular car, I had to plug the connector in first before I bolted it because of clearance issues. Then go ahead and put the bolts in and snug down. For the one under the hose, I tighten it just like I loosened it. Don't forget to secure the power wire to the alternator. And pop on the protective cap for the nut. Put the accessory belt back on. If yours fell all the way off, here's a little diagram to show you how it's routed. Intake tube is next. Tighten up the hose clamps, top it off with some power steering fluid, replace the engine cover, and connect the battery. Give it a start. Play with the wheel. You probably have to take it for a short drive. Still pretty hard to turn. I think the RPMs have got to be up for it to pump all that fluid. Oh! Wow, there we go. That was quick. Okay, let's just go straight back, check the fluid, and add more if we need to. Oh yeah, it sucked it right down. This is the stuff I'm using. I'm pretty sure it can be put in any make and model. It was just at my disposal. I only have a Napa in town, and it was the cheapest. So if it works, it works. I want to know, what do you guys use? If is this wrong? Am I doing something dumb? Am I gonna blow up my entire car and destroy the world by using this? I really want to know what you guys think. Unhook the battery. Remove the intake tube with the flathead and 7mm wrench. Remove the serpentine belt with the 17mm wrench. Unhook the alternator plug and use a 13mm socket to remove the power nut. Remove the 4 6mm Allen key bolts for the alternator, 2 on top, 2 on bottom. Then you can pull it out. Snip the non-reusable hose clamp on the rubber power steering line. Use a 22mm socket to remove the hardline banjo bolt. 3 bolts to remove. We got one there, and then on the back side we've got one there. And if I find any more, I will definitely include that as well. But that's all it looks like. What do you know? I did find another bolt. Here it is. This is the top of the power steering pump. It is going to sit right directly at the bottom through that hole. Installing your new power steering pump is just the reverse of the removal process with the added hose clamp on the power steering line. Dude, I just turned the camera on and I was like, oh my gosh, my face. Why are you naked?
What do you mean I have pants on?
Look at my face. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how it's done. 06 Audi A4. I made it just in time before dark. I think it took me about 2 hours. So I want to say about an hour of that was like camera work. So expect to do this with between an hour and 2 hours. If I did something wrong, let me know. If I missed something, let me know as well. I like to help. That's the whole point of these videos, is to help people who don't know what they're doing, or just kind of a walkthrough. So I appreciate every single one of you guys watching this. I guess let's go check out the old pump. I mean, this thing seems to look all right. Although I can see a good bit of wear, which might just have been from it having no fluid. Oh, there's a clip holding that on. Bring out the big gun. I don't know. Nothing looks too bad, but I think it's pretty worn from just being dry. I'm going to keep this piece to use for something. I'll put it in my keep cool pieces for something bucket. I don't know what this is. It might produce like a pulse by the looks of the grooves it has, and it's got a pretty bad lip ground into it. This housing looks normally worn. Shaft is alright. So yeah, I'm guessing the seal was bad and it leaked all of it out, so it kind of torched most of the innards. But on a good note, I've got some bolts out of it.